In most traditional tarot decks, pulling the Seven of Swords suggests you're being deceived, but in Joe Bandel's Oak Tarot of Love and Romance, it signifies a radical shift toward quiet inner strength. This complete subversion of a centuries-old archetype forces us to look at the collateral damage that often accompanies personal authenticity. The Seven of Swords is generally the trickster card. It shows a thief sneaking away from a camp in the dead of night. Bandel, however, strips away the deceit and replaces it with a profound loss of innocence. We are looking at a relationship where one person has stopped performing their expected role, finding a steady center, while their partner is left watching from a distance, completely conflicted.
Joe Bandel brings a highly specific lens to his deck. He spent years translating dark German horror and fantasy literature before creating the Oak Tarot. His work is rooted in what he calls the Oak Matrix, a philosophy that treats duality, things like chaos and order or male and female, not as a conflict, but as a necessary embrace. When we look at his interpretation of the Seven of Swords, he's asking us to examine the mechanics of emotional truth. The card depicts a man surrounded by 7 glowing swords that act as barriers. He is calm, he is self-assured. In the distance, a woman watches him, feeling like an outsider. The colors are deep grays, clear silvers, and hopeful golds. There's a strong oak tree in the background, which represents resilient reality.
The visual of the swords acting as barriers rather than stolen weapons changes the entire narrative. In traditional tarot readings, such as those detailed by tarot scholars at Llewellyn, the Seven of Swords often points to a partner who flouts the rules or avoids commitment. The swords are things taken without asking. Bandel turns the swords into boundaries. The man has not stolen anything. He has erected a perimeter of truth. He refuses to play a role anymore.
That refusal is the core of the card. Bandel describes this as the courage to be yourself. The nuance is that this courage is isolating. The prompt for this card explicitly mentions a loss of innocence. Innocence, in this context, is the illusion that a romantic relationship can survive indefinitely on performative behavior. When two people meet, they often play parts. They read from a script designed to keep the peace and maintain mutual attraction. The man in this image has dropped the script. He has found his quiet truth.
Let us look at the friction this causes. The card specifies differing experiences for the partners. The male experience is described as feeling a new sense of inner steadiness and stopping the attempt to be what others expect. The female experience is characterized by feeling the relationship change as one person becomes quieter and more authentic. She feels like an outsider. I find this dynamic fascinating because it highlights the dark side of personal growth. We celebrate authenticity in modern culture. We treat it as an unalloyed good, yet here is a scenario where one person's self-actualization actively destabilizes the partnership.
Growth is rarely symmetrical. When one partner stops reacting to the old triggers and stops feeding the established dynamic, the entire structure of the relationship wobbles. Think of it like a theatrical play. If an actor suddenly stops delivering their lines and just stands center stage, breathing calmly, the other actors will panic. They do not know how to continue the scene. The woman in the background of this card represents that panic. She is conflicted because the man she knows has retreated behind these 7 glowing swords of boundary and truth. He is no longer accessible in the way he used to be.
Is it possible that this quiet inner strength is just another form of avoidance? The traditional Seven of Swords is the card of strategic evasion. If a man becomes quiet and stops meeting expectations, he might label it authenticity, but the woman might experience it as emotional withdrawal. The barrier of glowing swords could just be a defensive wall dressed up as spiritual growth.
That is the exact tension Bandel captures. The line between establishing healthy boundaries and engaging in emotional stonewalling is thin. The presence of the oak tree in the imagery offers a vital clue. In the Oak Tarot, the oak tree represents grounded, objective reality. It is a recurring anchor across the deck. The man's calmness is not depicted as hostile or dismissive. It is described as self-assured. The isolation is a byproduct of his honesty, not a weapon he is using against her. It is lonely, but liberating.
The colors play a significant role there. Deep grays and clear silvers suggest solemnity and clarity. They are cold colors. They lack the warmth of passion or the chaos of anger. The hopeful golds are the only hint of warmth, perhaps suggesting that this painful transition could lead to a more genuine connection, provided the relationship survives the shift.
The transition from performance to reality requires this cold clarity. If you look at relationship psychology, there is a phase where the initial romantic projection shatters. Carl Jung discussed how we project our own unconscious ideals onto our partners. When those projections dissolve, it feels like a loss of innocence. We realize we are dealing with a separate human being, not a character in our personal narrative. Bandel's Seven of Swords is the visual representation of that exact moment. The man has reclaimed his projections. He is simply himself.
The tragedy, or perhaps the hard reality, is that the woman might have been in love with the performance. When the performance stops, she is left looking at a stranger. The deck outlines this as the female experience for this specific archetype, but we can view it universally as the experience of the partner left outside the swords. They must decide whether to respect this new boundary or walk away because the familiar comforts are gone.
They have to learn a new language. The previous language was based on mutual expectations and people-pleasing. The new language requires both people to stand in their own quiet truth. If the woman in the distance can find her own steady center, the relationship might evolve into a union of two whole individuals, rather than two codependent halves. Bandel's oak matrix philosophy emphasizes that duality is a loving embrace. To embrace truly, you must first be distinctly separate. The glowing swords enforce that separation.
I want to return to Bandel's background. His history with dark German horror translates into a willingness to look at the uncomfortable, shadowy aspects of love. Most romance-themed tarot decks focus on harmony, soulmates, and bright futures. The Oak Tarot does not shy away from the claustrophobia and the alienation that love can produce.
Bandel's approach strips away the sanitized version of romance. He acknowledges that real love involves severe growing pains. The Seven of Swords is a masterclass in this. It demands that we stop viewing a partner's silence or change behavior as an automatic betrayal. In many tarot traditions, a reversed or challenged Seven of Swords means secrets and lies. Here, the secret being revealed is simply the person's true self.
That is a stark pivot. We are taught that intimacy means total transparency and constant emotional merging. This card argues that true intimacy might require distinct, impenetrable boundaries. The Seven Swords glowing around the man are protective. They allow him the space to exist without conforming.
It is an act of preservation. The modern push for constant communication often leads to enmeshment, where neither partner knows where they end and the other begins. The man in the card has realized that to save himself and potentially the relationship, he must withdraw into his own core. The feeling of being an outsider that the woman experiences is necessary. She needs to feel outside of him to realize he is an autonomous being.
Which brings us back to the phrase loss of innocence. Innocence is comfortable, but it is ignorant. The loss of it forces maturity. The hopeful golds in the imagery indicate that this maturity is worth the pain of alienation. When you stop trying to be what others expect, you risk disappointing them. You risk losing their approval. The man in the image has accepted that risk.
He has traded approval for authenticity. That is the ultimate exchange in any mature relationship. You cannot have both. As long as you are seeking approval, you are performing. The moment you stand in your truth, you become vulnerable to judgment. The barrier of swords keeps the external judgment from altering his internal state.
Expanding on the idea of the midlife shift, this ties deeply into how society views selfishness. When someone decides to prioritize their own internal equilibrium over the demands of their partner or society, it is frequently criticized as selfish behavior. The man surrounded by the Seven Swords could easily be villainized by onlookers. They see a woman feeling alienated and a man seemingly indifferent to her distress.
We have a cultural bias that favors the distressed party in any relationship dynamic. The person who appears conflicted or emotional is often presumed to be the victim of the other person's coldness. Bandel's interpretation challenges this bias directly. The man is not inflicting pain. He is simply refusing to participate in a destructive or exhausting cycle. His calmness is not malice. It is survival. The swords represent the necessary boundary between his psychic well-being and her emotional demands.
This forces us to define what we actually mean by support. Usually, we define supporting a partner as managing their emotions for them. If they are anxious, we change our behavior to soothe them. If they are conflicted, we compromise our boundaries to bring them back to baseline. The Seven of Swords suggests that managing someone else's emotions is a fool's errand. It is the performance the man has finally decided to abandon.
When you stop managing your partner's emotions, you return their autonomy to them. It feels like abandonment to the person who was used to being managed, which is why the woman feels like an outsider. In reality, it is a profound act of respect. He is trusting her to handle her own internal landscape. He is trusting the resilient oak tree, the foundation of the relationship, to hold them both, even while they stand apart.
That is a difficult truth to swallow. It means that the loneliest moments in a partnership might actually be the most structurally sound. When the performative layers are stripped away, you are left with the deep grays and clear silvers of reality. The hopeful golds are not guaranteed, but they are possible only if both people survive the transition into authenticity.
The Oak Matrix framework relies on this exact process. The loving embrace of opposites cannot happen if the two forces are blurred together in a codependent mess. They must be distinct. The masculine and feminine energies, the inner steadiness and the external conflict, must exist in their pure forms before they can be synthesized. The Seven of Swords is the crucible where that purification happens.
It demands a total reevaluation of what a successful relationship looks like. Success is not an absence of conflict or a permanent state of merging. Success is the ability to stand in your own quiet truth without needing your partner to validate it and allowing them the space to do the same. If you found this episode thought-provoking, please send it to a friend.